Hello, and welcome to another episode of The Power of Story and Science. I'm your host, David Oatey, and on this show we have a mix of content and conversations on how you can be a more effective technical professional when you tell the story of your work. Today, I'm pleased to have as a guest for this conversation Jesse Hensley of the National Renewable Energy Laboratory. Want to say hello, Jesse?
Hello, everyone.
And Jesse and I met when I had occasion to give a talk for a group at NREL, as we call it, here in Golden, Colorado. And we wanted to follow up on that with a conversation between the two of us. And so, Jesse, I'm going to let you take the lead here and tell us a little bit about what you do, how you got interested in what you're doing now, sort of your story, in other words.
Great. Thanks, David. Well, I got into my role quite by chance. I came out of my undergrad in college during a recession in 2003, and I could not find a job to save my life. So I went to work up in the mountains and found some work outdoors as a ski patroller and started to get worried after about a year that I was going to lose the benefit of my undergrad engineering degree. So I started hitting up local professors at universities to see if I could do anything to look like I was exercising my degree. So washing glassware, toasting bagels, whatever I needed to do.
Okay,
Landed a
pretty broad,
position.
casting a pretty broad net. It sounds like.
Absolutely. I landed a position at the Colorado School of Mines to help a graduate student, and I was helping him do some experiments in a laboratory. And some professors there decided that they liked what I was doing and they asked me to stick around for grad school. And I said, no, thanks. I'm not interested in more education. And they said, no, we'll cover you on a grant. Just put your name on the paper. And I said, nah, not really interested. Then they said, how about you stay for a master's? It's just a year and a half. And if you like it, you can stick around for a PhD. So I said, I don't have a job. I'm not doing anything else anyway. Why not?
Why not?
Well, I stuck around, and it turned out that the master's was the part I didn't like. It was just the coursework. The PhD stuff is what I wanted to do. And I started to get into research, and I worked on fuel cell membrane materials and got back into the job world in 2007 in a much better economy and found myself at a startup. That startup was aiming to make fuels out of agricultural crop waste, and they failed catastrophically, as many startups do.
Oh no.
Found myself at the National Renewable Energy Lab doing almost the same job because the government was taking a much slower approach to solving this problem and not burning all their money in an instant. So I picked up the job and came on as a principal investigator and worked as a project leader and a researcher, and eventually started to have an opportunity to mentor younger folks. So interns from undergrad, graduate students, maybe even postdoctoral researchers. And I started to really love the aspect of mentoring and teaching and helping those younger folks understand how to do science. And that eventually got me to a group manager position where I now lead a group of engineers and scientists. And it's really changed my whole thinking about the profession of research and science. Started off my journey thinking it was completely transactional and mathematical and something that could be figured about and written about. And I've come to learn that it, like many jobs, is all about relationships and communication and people. And all the rest tends to fall away without those three elements. And I love studying that, and I love the opportunity to follow that passion and still call myself an engineer. Well, I'm really more of a psychologist and a shoulder to cry on and a strategist in what I do.
I love it. I love it. Communications, relationships, and people. You said those are the three.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So you did get your PhD then, I guess,
Mm-hmm.
right, from School of Mines.
That's correct.
Okay. That's quite a worthy credential. I mean, that's a challenging school, and I know they do very good work there. And so now you lead scientists and engineers, you said, who are doing research.
Mm-hmm. Correct.
Okay. Um, you acquired some very deep technical skills
Hmm.
around the things that you were researching, starting with fuel cell membranes and going from there to other things, obviously, and ways of new sources of energy and things like that. And yet, that's not really so much what you're doing now. Now you're leading people who are doing that.
Hmm.
And I'd like for you to, I don't know, to put it in academic terms, compare and contrast the two. What specifically, how did you get the additional skills you needed to do the things you're doing now that are different from what you were trained to do when you got your PhD?
That's a great question. It's come in a number of forms. I think it really started with me in graduate school, going to things like academic conferences and trying to present my work. And I felt that my work was very important and that everyone should care about it. And that when, if only someone came and listened to me, that they would see how brilliant I was and how much I had to offer the world, and money would come pouring in and all that comes with it.
Of course, of course.
Was I would go to these conferences and there might be three people in the room for my talk. And those people happened to be the next up to the podium. They were only there because they had to be for their session. No one was
Okay.
coming.
Yeah.
And that persisted into my professional career. And I was trying to figure out this puzzle of why, how can I be doing so much work and spending so much research money and in my mind making such a contribution and nobody's out there to notice this. I I tend to not like to be narcissistic. I don't like to promote myself on social media. It's just not in my blood. And I was really kind of having a problem with this because I thought this, what's the point of even doing the work if no one's going to listen? And I,
I'm just going to interrupt and underscore what you
yeah,
just said. What's the point of doing the work if no one's going to listen? Yeah. If
absolutely.
people don't know of your work, how can it change the world?
Of course. And there is something to be said about talking yourself up on social media, but eventually that becomes saturated too. You can only have so many followers. They're only going to have so much influence. And at the end of the day, if I'm trying to get the attention of a venture capitalist in California, it's not going to happen by any of those channels. It's just not.
Mm.
I really wanted to know, as a researcher, I like to do experiments. I wanted to know why does this happen? And that led me to a lot of reading on the subject and also to get into a local Toastmasters club and maybe understand maybe I just suck at speaking. And that's the problem. And I found out that no, that wasn't necessarily the problem. Yes, I needed lots of work. But the problem was that I wasn't connecting. And after going to a few keynotes of great speeches who were not in the technical fields, I learned a couple of very important things. One, I think, comes out of James Covey, which is the quote, "No one cares how much you know until they know how much you care." That one is burned in my brain. And another one was from the Buddha, which was uh, something along the lines of, if you love what you do, you will always be happy. And so those two were big pieces of the puzzle for me, that I didn't need to try to seek people's approval. I just needed to be happy in what I was doing. Why? That changed the way I approached my communication because I didn't care what people thought. And because I didn't care what people thought, it humanized me because I didn't come across as someone who was trying to one up somebody else. I wasn't trying to get my work noticed, my ideas funded. I was just sharing my experience of what I love. And that's non-threatening, it's non-confrontational, and it's easier for people to approach. And also by showing people how much I care, I noticed that until I showed a deep interest in other people's work, they weren't going to show an interest in mine.
Oh, I love that. Let me
Yeah.
underscore that as well. Until you showed a deep interest in other people's work, they weren't going to show the interest in yours. That's
Right.
profound because I often say that all effective communication starts with listening. And so you had to listen to what other researchers had to say.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And something very interesting came out of that, in that by listening to other people, I started to notice how poorly they conveyed their ideas.
Ah, okay.
Yes, I was listening with the intention of understanding them, and what I understood from them was, I can't follow this. This is too much. I don't know what you're I know what you're doing. If I'm awake and alert and had some coffee, I can follow what you did and how you did it. But I don't know why you did it, and I don't know
Don't
why.
know why. Okay. Yeah.
Right. And that was another trigger for me, was start with why. And
Mm-hmm.
not perhaps not coincidentally, I found a great talk by Simon Sinek on YouTube. I think it's one of the top 10 talks of all time, called Start with Why. And it was such a validating experience to watch that video, because I hadn't processed it in my head, what I was really thinking. I knew it unconsciously, but when Simon Sinek put it in the form of Start with Why, I was like, that's it. That is what I've been missing. Is I I have a why, and I am not presenting my why. And that is what people want from me. They don't care about the details. Sure, when it comes to the the bookwork, accounting, fine details, due diligence, yeah, they want to know the what, they want to know the how. But when I'm doing that main communication, when I'm trying to inspire or gain interest in my ideas, it's all about why. They want to know that I have a why that is worthy of their attention and consideration.
A why that is worthy of their consideration. Okay, so you just gave me the title for this episode.
Okay.
It's going to be Present Your Why.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to say start with why, because I'm pretty sure Simon Sinek's book by that title is on the bookshelf behind me. So we're not going to borrow that title.
Right.
But the why, you're right. I come back to that
Mm-hmm.
a lot when I'm coaching people and talking about presentations. Is the why is what engages people. You used a word a little while ago, and I was kind of waiting for you to circle back to that and see how that uh, tied in with some of what you were saying. 'Cause it's a word I use a lot, and that word is connect. You were
Okay.
saying that you were speaking, that you had good speaking skills, and you've
Mm-hmm.
been in Toastmasters who built those speaking skills, but that you didn't connect. How has that changed for you?
Well, it's been a bit of trial and error in learning what works and doesn't in communicating with people. But there is a lesson they teach in Toastmasters about using stories to connect with your audience. And stories, especially vivid stories that have something that resonates with someone, whether it's a memory, a sight, a smell, some weird fact that sticks in their head. Using those stories connects us in our deepest ways, because we are storytelling creatures as humans. That's how we have communicated for eons. And only now do we have written word and printing presses and PDFs and PowerPoints. That didn't just disappear in our genetic makeup when we invented the computer or the printing press. We're still storytelling creatures. And I have come to believe, and many others have hypothesized, that that's a way we build trust with each other, is we listen to each other's stories and we put ourselves in those stories, or we relate to those stories with our own stories. And essentially what we're doing is we're giving the audience a chance to come into our world, to understand more about who we are in a way that is free of numbers and figures and sales pitches. It's just us as a human. And it gives them a chance to recognize that it's okay to open up to our ideas, that we're not a threat, that we're part of the tribe, that this
Mm.
thing that is, they don't have to be on guard about. And I don't know why people come into these interactions on guard, but they do. Everybody who's not my friend is someone I don't know and I don't trust until I know them and they're my friend. And yeah, think about driving in traffic, right? If someone cuts you off in traffic and you don't know that person, you're likely to curse them. Well, what if that happens to be your best friend and you recognize them immediately? You might still curse them, but not in the same way.
Right.
You're gonna think to yourself, oh, that's my friend, I'm gonna get them back for this sort of way.
Or find out why they were in such a hurry. I don't know.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely. But there's such a
because
difference.
you tell yourself a different story about what just
Of
happened.
course, of
Yeah.
course, yeah.
That is all so powerful what you just said. I'm so glad we're having this conversation because I love to talk about the importance of story for building
Mhm.
trust and making connections with people. Can you give me an example of how you've used story in an otherwise technical presentation?
Mhm. I've used story many times to relay common experience in the laboratory in a technical presentation. So I might start my technical presentation with a story about an experiment that went awry or something that happened to me serendipitously that I wasn't expecting, that I had to do a double take and rethink my hypotheses or my approach. And the reason I do that is because, first of all, it cools my nerves. It's really easy to recount a story because you lived it. You're just recalling a memory. You're not trying to hit the perfect opener. You're just telling a story, and that's easy to do, like riding a bike. So it gets you calmed down, it gets you into the speech, and it takes away the nerves. The other thing it does is it puts you on common ground with those researchers that are in your audience because they can relate, maybe not to the exact experience, but they're they're being presented with this well-dressed, PhD educated, highly published individual who's going to tell them a thing or two about research. That's scary.
Yeah.
And now that person comes in and says, you're not going to believe my day last week when I dropped a jug of acetic acid on the ground and all the things that followed from that ruined my day, but actually led to an interesting discovery that I'm going to tell you about later in this presentation that I never would have even noticed had I actually tied my shoes that day and not tripped over my laces.
I love it.
It
I
changes the
absolutely
narrative.
love it. It does.
It changes the approach for them because now they're kind of interested to hear about this experience that they might have themselves, and they're not going to be told about something. They're going to get to share in my experience. Very different approach, very different experience for the audience. And it helps, if nothing else, to wake them up because it's so unusual in technical talks for them to start like that. They're expecting, I'm going to put up an outline and I'm going to use some big words and I'm going to throw up some big graphs. They've seen it the last 10 talks in a row, and you're just going to be the next one. And then boom, hey, this guy's talking about cleaning up an acid spill. What's going on here? It gets their attention back.
It does. It does, doesn't it? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And as you say, they've just sat through 10 other presentations that were the same thing over and over again. Today
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to tell you this and show you these graphs that are too dense for you to grasp on the screen, but I'm going to show them to you anyway. Do you have any questions?
Right.
What that raises a question in my mind. How do we get more people who give technical presentations to do what you do and to deviate from that standard that they've seen set by others and to realize
Mm-hmm.
they can do something better? How do we convince people of the benefit of actually connecting with their audience and doing something different from those other presentations?
Well, I have a couple thoughts on the matter. One is that by changing up your game, you're going to stand out from a crowded field. And in the technical world, standing out in a crowded field is important. So blending in is not your friend.
Blending in is not your friend. I like that. Very well put.
Now, that's pretty vague. Another challenge I might have to listeners would be to think about your own experiences giving technical presentations and how you felt about them. How did the audience react to you? How was your reception afterward? Did you get anything out of it? And how much of a risk are you taking by trying something different? Are you really going to lose that opportunity if you try something different? I did just that at a few conferences in the past. And I got sick of the constant cycle of showing up and everyone falls asleep in my presentation. And I put in my time, but boy, why did I spend so many hours on those slides?
Oh yeah, I've had that experience too.
I tried just making it so incredibly simple that the back of my mind, I was thinking, I am providing zero information effectively to the scientific community in this talk, but at least I'm going to make it interesting. And you know, the interesting thing about that is in those talks where I talked about nothing in particular, I had the most reception afterward. I had more people coming up to me, asking for my card, wondering what I did, how they can get access to my papers. And I think it's just because they were interested enough in what I was saying to be awake for long enough, to have seen my face for long enough, that it triggered something unconscious in their head that said, well, I paid attention to this guy for a while. He must be a big deal.
Must be a big deal. Okay.
And it could be as simple as that, right? Maybe people think you're a big deal based on how much of your attention they grabbed. Because you must be a big deal if you held their attention at a boring conference. You must be.
Must be. Must be.
Played out
Because you
that way
held their
for me.
attention.
As a matter of fact, I went to a conference on methanol. Talk about boring. This is a big trade conference on methanol and shipping it around the globe. And there was a lady who came up on stage to give a keynote. And she was doing it amongst a bunch of economic projections with bar charts and line charts and interest rates and all that sort of thing. And she hopped up and she put up one slide of a cow chewing its cud in a field, in a nice green field. And then a few slides later, or a few minutes later rather, she put up her second slide, which was a different cow in a different field. And she was making a point about using the dairy industry to produce methanol. Her talk was by far the most memorable of the whole event. She got the most reception afterward. I couldn't get it in edgewise to talk to this woman because I had some questions myself. People were just enraptured because she just told a story about what cows do. And they had a nice image of a cow and they could see, oh, okay, that's what that cow's doing. And it was very interesting and engaging. And then it equaled money somehow, right? Everyone remembered cows equal money. They don't remember how. They don't remember, but they do remember, okay, I need to talk to Rebecca,
yeah,
the CEO of Oberon Fuels, if I want to go make money out of my cows. That's all they remembered. And they remembered, you know, that's what they took away from the conference, right?
There wasn't a
chart in that presentation. There was not a single numerical figure.
So the only visuals were the cows.
Just the cows. There's the cows and the story of the cows.
Cows and the story of the cows. Wow, that's a great story. I can just picture that, and I can picture all those people crowding around her and wanting to talk to her afterward, because Absolutely. She made a difference.
Mm-hmm.
She made a difference because she did something memorable.
Exactly.
Wow. That's a terrific insight. I've so enjoyed our conversation. I love how you brought up the importance of story, the importance of the why, that these are how you connect with people. And without that connection, nothing happens.
That's right.
What is one thing you know now that you wish somebody had taught you much sooner?
well, it's a bit off of the topic of the presentation, but it's related, is that I am not that important. And that is incredibly hard to hear for people in technical fields, I think, especially because we are coached to sell the importance of our ideas. And I wish that I would have been trained that my ideas weren't so important, because in losing that, I have gained importance. It's abstract, and it actually tends to have ties in some Eastern religions, where the more you try to grasp something, the less you can have it. The more you give it up, the more you gain it. And by giving up that drive to show how important I was, I could let all of that ego-driven bluster fall away, and then people could connect with me. And when people connected with me and found out who I was, I became so much more important to them than any of my data and papers and figures. And if I could have bypassed that, it would have been great. This futile fight for relevance that was pointless.
Futile fight for relevance. Wow.
Mm-hmm.
And when people connect with you, that's what makes you important. It's not the information, not the facts and figures.
Exactly.
Now, this has been deeply insightful. I'm looking forward to going back and listening to our conversation again because we've covered such interesting ground. I feel like I could just keep talking to you for a long, long time. However, I'm going to honor the time and draw the conversation to a close, because you have given my audience a lot to think about in the less than half an hour that we've been talking. Is there well, I don't. I was going to ask you for a final thought, but that last one you gave us was so profound. It's a good thought to end on. So let me just ask you this: how could members of my audience follow up with you? Is there a way you'd like to hear from people, or a place you want to send them?
You can certainly find me on LinkedIn at Jesse Hensley. I don't log into social media that often, maybe no more than every couple of weeks. So if you send me an invite and you haven't received the acceptance, don't worry. It just means I'm not a slave of social media. You can also email me at jesse.hensley@nrel.gov, and perhaps you can spell it out in your...
Sure. I'll put it on the screen for the video version and in the program notes as well. I'll just go ahead and plug your email address in there, so anybody that finds the program will be able to follow up with you that way. Thank you for sharing that information, because I would imagine that a lot of people are curious about the things that you've been talking about how the evolution of what you do from the very technical skills to this much broader realm of what we, I think, somewhat unfortunately call soft skills, the things that are not as easily measurable and quantifiable and yet are so important in the workplace, that connecting with people and understanding that relationships and communication and people are really what it's all about. That's a tremendous insight. So thank you, Jesse, for having this conversation with me.
Of course, it's been my pleasure.
And anyone who would like to follow up with me can find the homepage of this program by going to storyandscience.com. And when you explore that site, you can find buttons that will allow you to jump on my calendar and schedule a discovery call with me, because I always love to hear from my audience members about what you've heard, what you've taken away, what you might still be wondering about. Or as a teacher I admire greatly, who was my a kindergarten teacher for two of my daughters, he would say, "What did you notice and what did you wonder?" And I just think, between those two queries, that encompasses so much. So if there's anything that you wonder, anything you notice about this program you'd like to talk to me about, please connect with me that way. And as always, thank you for being part of the Story and Science community.